My son said, "Give your savings for my baby." I said nothing, but froze the account that very night. My name is Alma Prescott, 74 years old. I've spent most of my life in a little town you've probably never heard of, Lowen, Idaho. I'm not anyone special. Nothing about me stands out except maybe that I was a mother, a wife, and for nearly half a century, the one who always gave up the last bite on the table. I used to believe that if I was good enough, quiet enough, patient enough, love would find its way to me. But I've come to understand there are women like me, born to be leaned on but never asked, "Are you tired, Mom?" I'm not telling this story to complain or to be pitied. I just want to say if there's someone out there who's lived their whole life for others and never once for themselves, please listen. Not to feel sorry for me, but to recognize yourself in the parts you've forgotten for far too long. What are you keeping that money for, Mom? You don't have anyone left to take care of, do you? I was ladling the last spoonful of chickpea soup into a bowl when Julian said it. His voice wasn't raised, wasn't soft, just neutral, as if he were asking about the weather. Tessa sat beside him, cradling baby Pippo on her chest, eyes locked on her phone screen. I could hear the baby's gentle, even breath, warm and steady, like a kitten asleep. And yet, inside me, a strange chill crept in. I didn't respond, just quietly poured more Earl Grey into the white teacup with the chipped handle, the kind my husband used to love. Back when he was alive, he'd spend whole afternoons reading in the wooden chair by the window, a pot of tea always close at hand. Now that chair sits empty. Julian lifted his cup and winced at the heat. He never liked tea, always preferred the office coffee. Sometimes I wonder if maybe that's why there's always been this quiet space between us. Not cold, just untouched. I'm thinking about starting a small investment fund for Pippa, he continued, not looking at me. She's going to need a lot. School, health insurance, everything. I just thought maybe you could help. I set the teapot down gently on its saucer, careful not to make a sound. Late autumn sunlight filtered through the window, landing on the veins of my hand. Years at the library had left their marks. Worn nails, swollen joints, faint traces of blue ink between the fingers. The savings from Dad, Julian added more softly this time. You still have it, don't you? I nodded slightly. Not a yes, not a no. I've lost count of how many times people brought up that money. Bank advisors, old friends of my husband. But this was the first time my son mentioned it. And he didn't really ask, he stated. Tessa looked up, her eyes meeting mine for just a brief moment. We know you're independent, she said. But you live alone. Everything's settled. If there's ever a time to help, it's now. I don't know when the words live alone became a reason, as if not having anyone left meant I no longer had a reason to keep anything for myself. As if I'd become an empty cupboard people could reach into for that last forgotten thing without asking. I smiled politely. The tea's gone cold. Let me make a fresh pot. No one objected, but no one answered either. Lunch ended as quickly as it had begun. Julian stood up first, said he had to stop by the store. Tessa followed, holding Pippa a little tighter as they left. Before going, Julian placed a piece of paper on the table. Just take a look. Some suggestions from the bank. Norash, inudda. Didn't pick it up. Just looked at it like a bill already paid. When the door clicked shut, I was still standing in the same spot, my hand resting on the handle of the now cold teacup. A November breeze slipped through the window frame. I heard the dry rustle of maple leaves on the porch, familiar, yet today it sounded distant. I walked slowly to the small table by the window, the one where my husband used to sit. The ivory ceramic lamp was still there, and an old photo frame with pictures of Bea and Clary, Julian's sister's children. I pulled open the drawer beneath the table and gently tucked the paper inside next to old bank letters and a leather-bound notebook. The one I write in each night. Not much, just one line. A quiet full stop to another day spent in the margins. That night, after the lights were out, I wrote, "Today my son called me alone." I cleared the table slowly, each plate, each glass, as if I were packing up a memory, too old to hold, too uncertain to let go. When I picked up the cup Julian had left half full, still with half a pecan cookie beside it, I let out a sigh. Not from tiredness, but because something inside me felt like a soap bubble, colorless, shapeless, yet left emptiness when it burst. I opened the kitchen window. The breeze carried in the damp scent of soil and fallen leaves. Out front, the maple had lost nearly all its leaves. Just a few clung on, trembling. I looked at them the way I sometimes look at myself, with nothing left to hold on to, just not quite ready to let go. Vera knocked while I was folding the napkins. I recognized her gentle rhythm. 2 short taps, then 1 long. She never calls ahead, never needs to. She's the kind of person who arrives like autumn wind, unassuming, but always on time. Things were so quiet. "I thought you'd gone somewhere," she said, holding up a small paper bag. "I dried some lavender. Thought you might hang it in your room. It helps you sleep." I smiled, took the bundle, and invited her in. She didn't hesitate, just walked in like it was her own home. Vera used to run a little flower shop at the end of our street. After her husband passed, she closed it for good. She lives alone like me. But unlike me, she still goes out, still laughs, still remembers to ask, "How are you really?" "Your son came by?" she asked, noticing the 2 chairs slightly out of place. I nodded. "Not long, just stopped in." "You okay?" Vera asked, meeting my eyes. "No diturs." I didn't answer right away, just poured tea into 2 cups, one for her, one for me, and sat down. She didn't press, just sipped her tea, set it down, and told me about the neighbor's cat climbing into her flower pots again. I listened, nodded, smiled quietly, thankful for a silence that had company in it. After Vera left, the house returned to its old rhythm. I turned on the radio. Old jazz floated out. No lyrics, just trumpet and piano threading through the air like a worn-out breath inside the heart. I picked up the leather notebook and added another line beneath the one I wrote earlier. "It's been a long time since anyone asked what I truly want." The clock struck 8. I stood up, drew the living room curtains. Outside, the street lamp cast a golden glow over the sidewalk strewn with dry leaves. At the end of the road, I saw Julian and Tessa's car lights just now leaving her parents' place. Probably talking about that fund for Peepa again. I wasn't angry, just saw it more clearly than ever. I'm no longer mom in their eyes. I'm a drawer holding money, old trinkets, bits of memory waiting to be opened, picked through, then closed again. I turned off the living room light and walked toward my bedroom, but didn't go in. Instead, I returned to the little table by the window, to my husband's old chair, where I still read letters, write notes, remember the years that passed. I opened the drawer, took out the bank. The plastic cover was faded now, but still clean, its corners crisp. I held it for a long time like it was something alive, something that once upon a time I had trusted completely. Then I stood up, walked to the kitchen phone and called the bank. Said nothing. "You're still getting Social Security, right? You have more than enough." I read that line in an email at 7 in the morning before the sun had fully risen over the distant mountains. Julian had sent it at 11 p.m., probably while feeding Peepa or maybe discussing something with Tessa. I didn't reply, just shut the laptop, washed my hands, and set the kettle on to boil. Outside the window, the sky was heavy. The ground soaked with mist, and maple leaves blanketed the narrow path leading up to the porch, brown and yellow, mixed like an old rug no one bothered to clean. I put on my thick wool coat, wrapped a scarf around my neck, and stepped outside. No one to wave goodbye to, no one I needed to tell. The bank was 2 blocks away, past a furnace repair shop and an old gas station. I walked slowly, stepping over puddles that had settled between the bricks. Each time the wind blew, the leaves lifted, spun in place, then fell again. I didn't feel all that different. Inside the repair shop, 2 young men were laughing, drinking coffee, sharing stories about the weekend. One of them noticed me and nodded. I returned the gesture with a faint smile. I don't dislike young people. It's just that sometimes the distance between their laughter and me feels too wide to cross. The bank was small, the kind of local branch where everyone knows your name. The bell above the door jingled as I walked in. The receptionist looked up, smiled, and said, "Good morning, Mrs. Prescott. What can we help you with today?" I nodded and said softly, "I'd like to speak with someone about my account." Will, the blond young man who always wore a white shirt, came out from the office. Mrs. Alma, long time no see. Please come in. His tone was respectful without a trace of condescension. I was grateful for that. We sat across from each other. I pulled out my bank statement and placed it on the table. I'd like to freeze all of my accounts, just temporarily. Will raised his brows slightly, but didn't press. We can do that. Is there a particular reason you'd like to add to the note? I shook my head. No need. Just freeze it. I still have Social Security. It's enough for my daily expenses. Will nodded. I'll take care of it right away. It'll take about 10 minutes. Would you like to wait in the lounge? I didn't answer, just looked out the window where a light drizzle had begun to fall. When everything was done, Will handed me a confirmation slip. If you ever need to make changes, just come back. I thanked him, slipped the paper into my purse, and left the bank.
No explanation, no apology, no regret.
On the way home, I turned into a small cafe on the corner. Dusty Spoon, it looked the same as always. Scuffed wooden tables, warm yellow lights, black and white photos of the old town on the walls. I chose a seat by the window, ordered a hot café au lait, paid in cash, and left $2 under the saucer. The barista was a young woman with her hair tied back neatly, wearing a brown apron. "Ma'am, you look a little sad today," she said. I looked at her, didn't answer, just nodded and took a sip. Bitter but warm. Outside, the leaves kept falling. I left the cafe at dusk. The walk home wasn't long, but the cold cut deep. I pulled my scarf tighter, stepping carefully along the now damp path. The houses on both sides had shut their doors early. Soft, warm lights glowing in each window, but none of them were mine. Back home, I hung up my coat, set my purse on the table, then checked the mailbox by the porch. A few flyers, a bill, and a cream-colored envelope with familiar handwriting. I recognized it right away. A Thanksgiving invitation from the senior center. Just like every year, I placed the envelope on the table without opening it. No need. I already knew what it would say. You are warmly invited to Thanksgiving dinner for seniors living alone. They always write it like that, like living alone is a problem that needs fixing. I sat down in the chair by the kitchen, the one Russell used to love. When he was alive, he'd eat breakfast there, reading the paper, muttering about the headlines. I reached under the cabinet and pulled out the wooden box, the one carved with the words, "Russell Prescott, always." I placed the bankbook inside next to a few old photographs and the leather-bound novel he used to read. Then I locked it. The key had always been in the tea table drawer. No one else knew. When I stood, my shadow stretched across the living room wall. The house was silent. No children's voices. No man calling his wife's name. Only me, the old woman holding the money. I walked to the sink, rinsed the cafe cup I brought home, and placed it carefully on the rack, just as I had for decades. A small act, but it felt like tidying up before leaving, like returning everything to its rightful place. The phone on the table buzzed. A message from Vera. Old movie at the center tonight. It's a Wonderful Life. You coming? I read it, then set the phone down.
Didn't reply.
That movie, Russell and I watched it the first Thanksgiving after Julian was born. He held my hand and said, "If you ever feel like you have no one, remember, you'll still have me." I turned on the computer. The screen lit up slowly. Julian's email still hovered in the corner. "Mom, please think about it. We're doing everything we can." I opened a new tab and searched for flights from Lewin to Portland.
Cheap.
My eyes stopped at a small line. Departure early Saturday morning. Price, $139. I didn't book it, just saved it. But for the first time in years, I thought about leaving. Not to visit anyone, just to leave the place where I'd been labeled alone. I checked. "Why is your account frozen?" Julian's voice on the phone was dry, sharper than usual.
No.
"How are you, Mom?"
No.
"What are you up to?" Just a question slicing through the quiet like a knife across an old wooden table. I didn't answer, just looked out the window. Light rain had started to fall. A deep red maple leaf skimmed the glass. The first wind of the season carried the scent of wet earth and something older still. Julian spoke again, softer this time. You did it yourself. The bank said you signed the form. Why? I could hear the washing machine humming through the wall, the clock ticking slow and steady. Then I pressed end. Not out of anger, just because. I had nothing left to explain. Julian had grown used to my silence. Once he said, "You're always so quiet. It drives me crazy." But he never asked why. I set the phone down, folded a charcoal gray sweater, and tucked it into a small cloth bag. Next to it was Russell's old leather notebook, now filled with my handwriting, 1 or 2 lines each night, not meant for anyone to read, just to remind myself I'd been here on this day. I opened an old cabinet and took out the only photo I still had of Emily, my first child, the one I lost too young. The picture had faded, but her eyes still looked at me from somewhere far away. I placed it in the bag between the sweater and the notebook. Not much to carry, just what still weighed on the heart. Outside, the wind picked up. I heard a car door slam out on the street. Could have been Julian. I didn't go to the window. Didn't open the door. The house was quiet, but not empty. It was full of the past. Every corner, every fold in the sheets held the trace of a woman who once believed that if she tried hard enough, stayed quiet enough, loved enough, she'd be needed. I pulled a small suitcase to the door. The rain was still falling, light but steady. I sat in the chair and exhaled, slow and deep. The phone buzzed again. This time, "Vera, you all right? I knocked last night.
Didn't see you.
Pretty sure that was Julian standing outside your gate just now." I typed a single line in reply. "I'll be away for a few days. When I return, I won't be the one they ask for anymore." I took the house key off the hook and placed it gently on the old wool scarf I had knit last winter. Each stitch even repeated, like the way I had lived, quiet, steady, unnoticed. I stood in the middle of the living room and looked around one last time, not to check, just to remember. Everything was in its place. On the shelf, the small photo frame of Bea and Clary, 2 grandchildren who only knew the word grandma through polite greetings. On the wooden table, I placed a small yellow note written in black ink. "The fireplace is off. So am I." It wasn't meant for anyone, just something to let the house know. I wasn't angry, but I was leaving. I drew the curtain closed, then gently peeled off the old Thanksgiving card taped to the glass door. I don't remember which year it was from. A hand-drawn turkey. Colors faded. I'd kept it all these years, as if pinning something warm to the door could somehow warm the cold corners of the heart. I folded it in half. Didn't tear it. Didn't throw it away. Just tucked it into the inner pocket of my bag. The rain tapped softly outside. The wind blew from the north, sweeping across the low rooftops of Lowen. In that stillness, I imagined footsteps. Julian's, then Tessa's, and the questions they'd hurl like stones. I wasn't afraid, maybe because I'd stopped hoping to be understood. 4:45 a.m. I sat in the old fabric-covered wooden chair by the dining table. The same table Julian once used to learn his letters, then his sums. I opened the computer. The screen glowed blue, cold, empty. I typed Lowen to Portland. One-way ticket. The earliest flight, 6:30 a.m. Just enough time to make it. If I called a ride now, I didn't hesitate. I booked it. No note left.
No voy se me.
They'd find out soon enough, like Julian did when he saw the account was frozen. But they wouldn't find me here anymore. Not in this chair, not beside a pot of cooled Earl Grey. I stood, rolled the suitcase to the door, and when the door closed behind me, there wasn't a sound loud enough to make me turn back. I knocked 4 times, no answer. The curtains had been drawn since yesterday. I'm not the kind of person who leaves someone waiting at the door. But this time, I let Vera do just that. She knocked a few times, then went quiet. I imagine her now peeking through the window, hoping for a light to flick on, or the soft sound of footsteps behind the curtain. But I'd left early that morning. The house finally was as silent as I'd always wished it could be. No one asked where I was going. No one needed to know, and no one had the right to make me stay. I took the first bus to the airport. The sky was still cold, wind slipping through the thin coat I've kept since Russell passed. My luggage was nothing more than a faded cloth bag. Inside it, a photo of my daughter, a leather notebook, and an old scarf. The last thing I did before leaving the house was peel the old Thanksgiving card off the glass door. It used to be a symbol, my last thread of hope that someone might remember me. But every year it ended the same. Dinner alone, dishes washed to the ticking of the clock. I wasn't going to do that again. Vera called Julian not long after leaving my front porch. I knew she would. She's the kind of person who can't hold worry quietly, especially when silence feels wrong. Julian picked up, and I can picture his face changing the moment she said, "Your mother isn't home, and it looks like she left early this morning." I sat still on the plane by the window, clutching a small plastic cup of water. I wasn't afraid, just empty, but not hollow. It felt like a blank page waiting to be written on by my own hand this time, not someone else's. I imagined Julian driving back to Lewin, tense, maybe for the first time wondering, "Where's Mom?" He'd never asked that before. Not when I was sick. Not when I went quiet. Not even the times I watched him from the second-floor balcony, hoping for a wave. To Julian, I was always just there, a default presence. No need to check on. And maybe to Tessa, I'm nothing more than an outdated generation clinging to old, useless things, only relevant if I could contribute financially. They might never know. Or maybe they've forgotten that I was once a librarian. The one who helped children in our town learn to read. The one who encouraged older women to sign up for their first creative writing classes. I once stayed up all night reading to Russell during his depression just so he wouldn't feel alone. I was all of that. Even if no one remembers, I do. And I hold on to those memories the way one might hold a map close to the heart, so that when lost, I can still find my way back to who I once was. The plane began its descent. The Oregon forest came into view. Patchy, gray, wet. I arrived in Carlton, a small town where no one knows me. Even better, a bus took me to the west side of town. Miles was waiting outside the wooden house, an old friend of Russell's, now managing a family-run nursery. We'd only met a handful of times since the 80s. But the day I called, he asked just one thing. "You need a room and some quiet, right?" I nodded, though he couldn't see it. I stepped off the bus, legs stiff. Miles handed me a cup of warm cider, a hint of cinnamon in the air. "We don't ask why around here," he said. I nodded again, not in agreement, but in relief. It had been so long since someone simply trusted me without digging through the silence. The room he offered was once his late wife's guest room. The pine walls had yellowed with time. The window looked out to a row of cedar trees. I set down my bag and opened the photo frame of Clary, my daughter, the only one who ever called me my best friend. I didn't cry, but something in me softened, like soil after the season's first rain. That evening, Miles invited me for dinner. It was simple: butternut squash soup, toasted bread, and a bit of cheddar cheese. He didn't ask why I came, just told me about last winter, how he and some neighbors chopped wood and repaired roofs. No one asked what the others had been through, he said. We just did our part. I nodded. I understood. Sometimes just being there is enough. On the table was a small ceramic dish that looked just like the one Clary made in middle school art class. I remembered how she pressed it into my hands, saying, "Keep it, Mom. Use it when you're old for your sewing needles." I still have it. It's in the bag next to her photo. That night, I sat by the window and wrote in my notebook, "This isn't running away. This is choosing a different place to breathe." The wind moved through the trees. The room stayed quiet, but this time the quiet didn't make me feel left behind, only left in peace. My son doesn't call anymore, and I've stopped hoping. I once told Vera, half joking on a rainy afternoon, "I'm like a light bulb. You only notice me when I burn out." But sitting alone in Miles's small wooden room, I finally understood what I meant. All these years I lived like background furniture in someone else's life. Only useful in a crisis, only visible when I stopped working. Now here I am, sitting still in the quiet air of a November evening. And no one calls. Julian hasn't texted, hasn't asked, no emails, and I no longer wait. His silence is no longer a question that gnaws at me. It's become a space I accept. Outside, wind rustles through the chestnut trees. The scent of cinnamon and fermented grapes from the kitchen seeps into the threads of my coat, hanging by the door. Miles is kneading German-style bread, dense, crusty loaves. His hands move steady, sure, like a machine that's known its rhythm for a lifetime. I stand beside him, not doing much, just watching. He doesn't mind. In fact, he says, "Just standing there. You make the kitchen warmer." I laugh softly, barely audible. It's been a long time since anyone said something kind without a reason behind it. Here, it seems my presence is enough. In the mornings, I tend the garden. Miles shows me how to care for the herb beds and the young grapevines. Each row is marked with white ceramic tiles handwritten with the varietals: Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Riesling. He hands me a soft rope, showing me how to tie the fragile vines to the wooden stakes so the winter wind won't snap them. "Be gentle," he says, "but firm, kind of like raising a child. You'd know." I nod, though deep down I think maybe I once tied things too tight. I move slowly, but steadily. No one rushes me. No one checks the clock. And I'm surprised to realize my 74-year-old body has never truly moved at its own pace. I feel the damp soil beneath my fingertips, the sharp scent of crushed grape leaves, and even the sound of my own breathing, steady in the wide open air. While I collect dry leaves, hundreds of miles away, Julian is sitting in his kitchen in Spokane, eating dinner alone. Roast beef, green beans, sandwich bread. Pip is asleep. Tessa is live streaming a yoga class in the next room. The house is big, modern, and strangely cold. No one mentions Grandma. As night falls, he finishes cleaning and heads into his office. He tries to focus on a spreadsheet, but the numbers blur and scatter. He shuts the laptop. The silence of the house no longer feels peaceful. It has weight, and it presses down on him. He opens a drawer beneath the desk, rummaging through old files, not really looking for anything in particular. There's a small wooden box he hasn't opened in years. Inside are a few old photos, a birth certificate, and a birthday card from 1999. His mother's slanted handwriting reads, "Son, I've always believed you'd grow up to be a man who listens." He never paid much attention to that card, but now it's like he's seeing it for the first time. So simple. No lecture, no guilt, but the words echo in his head like a silent judgment. Listen, he didn't. Julian folds the card and sets it down. He walks out to the living room. The room is dark, only the glow of a street lamp seeping through the window. He stares at the olive green leather chair by the fireplace, his mother's chair. When Pippa was born, Elma stayed for a few days. She would sit there all afternoon holding the baby, singing lullabies whose names he no longer remembers. Once, Tessa said softly, just loud enough, "She's holding her too long. The baby needs to learn independence." Julian had agreed, even nodded. Now the chair is empty. He doesn't know if the emptiness in his chest comes from the chair or from himself. He picks up his phone, reopens an old email his mother sent last year, his birthday. Subject: "Happy birthday, son." The message had only 2 lines. "I don't need anything. Just hope you haven't forgotten what once made you happy." He used to think it was emotional bait meant to make him feel guilty. Now it just feels quiet. He walks over to the bookshelf, pulls out a dusty photo album. There's a picture from Yellowstone when he was 9. His mother's arms around him, Clary skipping ahead, the sun slanting through her windblown hair and her smile so free of weariness. He stares at it for a long time, then closes the album, says nothing. For the first time, Julian doesn't call, doesn't text. Not out of anger, but because he doesn't know what to say. As for me, I'm in Carlton learning to make red grape compote for the weekend fair. The kitchen is small, but well stocked. Miles plays an old jazz record. Cadet Baker's Autumn Leaves floats from a wooden speaker. That trumpet soft, aching, like fog curling through memory. I close my eyes for a few seconds. This song used to play on the radio back home. Those evenings I cooked dinner waiting for Julian to return from school. He used to ask, "Don't you get bored staying home all the time, Mom?" And I'd ruffle his hair and say, "As long as you come home, I'm not bored." Now I cook for no one. And somehow I feel lighter than I did in all those busy years. That night, I slept through until morning.
No dreams, no joultsewak.
The sheets smelled faintly of lavender, a sachet Vera gave me, which I brought along, the pillow soft enough. For the first time in years, no one scolded me in my dreams for forgetting something, for not holding Russell tighter when he was drowning in sadness, for not giving Julian more money. I woke up to sunlight spilling through the window. Beside the bed was an old photo of Miles and his 3 hunting dogs from his days in Texas. He once told me, I left. No one saw me off. No one stopped me. I remember how he said it calmly, without regret. I asked, were you sad? He replied, I found freedom. Scary at first, but you get used to it. Freedom isn't given, Elma. You have to take it. I ate breakfast. Avocado, eggs, the last slice of apple tart. Then checked the pots in the back garden. There's an empty patch beneath the old oak. Sunlight hits it just right. I brought out a wooden chair, sat for a while, then wrote in my notebook. Today I want to plant a new tree. One only I will know the name of. I don't know if Julian's reading old emails. Maybe he's still upset. I'm not even sure I'm still mom in his eyes. Maybe now I'm just the silence he doesn't know how to sit with. But I don't need anyone to name my role anymore. Today I am Elma, the woman making grape compote. The one who sleeps soundly after planting things. The one who isn't asked, does the old woman still need the money? And that is enough. That afternoon, I walked the path along the wooden fence to the edge of the hill. That evening, I helped Miles wrap jars of honey. My hands aren't as quick as they once were, but still steady enough to write each label in black ink. Lavender, wildflower, orange blossom. The kitchen light glowed warm. I leaned back in the chair, inhaling the mingled scent of honey and cinnamon, and I thought, for the first time in years, I've lived a full day without fearing someone might call me in the middle of the night. That evening, I made peppermint tea. Miles sat on the porch holding a book he claimed he didn't need to read anymore. He knew every word by heart. I brought him a cup and said, I'm planting a tree tomorrow. He asked, what kind? I said, one only I will know the name of. He didn't ask further, just nodded. Here, people don't ask about each other's pasts. Everyone arrives with a blank space and is allowed to keep it. I held the teacup, feeling the warmth seep into my palms. All these years I gave my whole life to others without saving any part for myself. Now I keep this evening, this cup of tea, this tree I'll plant tomorrow, and this quiet where, for the first time, I don't feel left behind. My son sent a video. Pippa taking her first steps. No message attached, no explanation, no, hi mom. Just the clip. Tiny feet wobbling forward, arms raised, mouth babbling syllables that hadn't yet found their shape. I watched the whole thing, smiled, then deleted it. The kitchen still carried the scent of last night's apple pie. Outside, winter sunlight angled in through the wooden frame. I took out a piece of paper and wrote a few lines to myself. Thank you for not turning back. I didn't expect to feel this peaceful, but I was. No waiting for a call. No flinching at the doorbell. No wondering if someone might need something from me. Silence wasn't loneliness anymore. It was rewarding. Miles was out back trimming the vineyard trellis. I went to help. He pointed to a patch of soil near the fence. This spot gets sun all day, he said. If you're thinking of planting something, that's the place. I nodded. Yesterday, I'd already called a nursery in the next town and reserved a small pear tree, a late-bearing variety. I'm going to name it Claire. That afternoon, I cleared the porch, set out an old wooden chair Miles found in storage. I laid my wool blanket across the seat, brewed a pot of chamomile tea, and sat quietly, watching the front yard dry after the night's rain. It had been so long since I'd felt I could simply sit, not out of fatigue, but peace. The years before this, I lived in a constant state of waiting for Clary to call, Julian to visit, someone to need me. Not anymore. I opened my leather-bound journal and wrote with purple ink. Not much, just a few lines, steady, like a lullaby to myself. I woke early and hung the blankets out to dry. It's warmer than the past few mornings. The young tree arrives this afternoon. The soil is ready. I paused, then added, today, I didn't ask what I still mean in other people's lives. In Spokane, Julian was changing Pippa's diaper. She flailed and screamed when he wiped her face. He didn't yell or snap, just sighed. Lately, he didn't feel so sure of himself. He noticed the way he walked through the house, how Pippa sat cross-legged with her teddy bears in the same corner Clary once favored beneath the crooked crane painting. Last night, he reread the old birthday card from his mother. The words had once felt empty, not because they lacked meaning, but because he hadn't let them be full. He reached for new paper and started writing for the first time by hand in years. Nothing grand, just, "It's colder today." Pippa fell twice but kept getting back up. "I remember you once said, you have to fall a few times to learn how to walk." He didn't expect a reply, but sealing the envelope felt like release. As if sometimes what most needs to be said isn't for someone to hear, but for us to admit it still matters. That afternoon, my tree arrived. Small, barely to my knee, roots wrapped in damp soil. I held it close as if I were holding something alive, truly alive, in both hands. I carried it to the patch behind the garden where light poured in all afternoon. Miles had already set out a shovel. I dug slowly, each motion clean and unrushed. The earth here was softer than I expected. When it was done, I smoothed the soil around the base with my hands, then tied a small wooden tag to the support stake. Claire in slanted handwriting. No one knows what it means but me, and I like it that way. That evening I made onion soup, simple, just for me and Miles. He shared another old story about leaving home at 32, leaving behind a wife and 2 kids. "I thought someone would stop me," he said. No one did. No one followed. Just silence. And sometimes that silence is your answer. I nodded. Didn't ask more. We ate in quiet, only the sound of spoons against bowls. That night, I went to bed early. No faces followed me into sleep.
No dreams unfinished.
Just a morning waiting. Brighter, quieter, enough to begin again without needing someone to name it. The next morning, I made coffee, not tea. I wanted to try the bold, bitter scent, something rough I'd always avoided. In the small kitchen, the sound of coffee dripping into the glass carafe became a softer rhythm than any music I'd ever heard on the radio. I placed the cup on the table, pulled out the wooden chair outside my window, Claire. The tree swayed gently in the breeze. I watched it the way you might watch someone just born. Delicate, vulnerable, but not fragile. I thought if next year is kind, there might be one fruit. If not, I'll wait anyway. From the few books I brought, one was a blank journal. I opened it and wrote, not for Julian, not for Vera, not for Russell or Clary, for me. The woman who spent 40 years living for someone else, now learning to live for herself. Outside, the first snow was falling, gentle, clean, as if the world had been wrapped in quiet. I put on my wool coat, my hat, and stepped onto the porch, holding the warm mug close. Each sip carried something through me. The past, the future, steady, hot, real. Inside, my phone buzzed softly. A quiet notification. I didn't rush. When I returned to the kitchen, I checked it. A photo, a postcard, a picture of the letter Julian sent. His handwriting. I don't expect a reply, but if you're reading this, know that I've thought about you. No mention of Pippa. No money, just words, no demands, no guilt. I set the phone down.
Didn't delete it.
Didn't save it either. That afternoon, I walked to the nursery out back where Miles dries grapes for the new wine. He pointed to the long wooden tables beneath the covered roof. This weekend we're doing a first taste. Could you make some bread? I nodded. And I knew for the first time in my life, I'd bake. Not to welcome someone, not to win favor, not to save a piece for your son, just to bake. On the way home, a letter from Vera waited in the mailbox. Beige paper, familiar handwriting. She wrote, "Town feels emptier without you. I used to think no one would notice if you left. But it turns out the silence you left behind is louder than the church bells each morning." I smiled. The letter didn't ask me to return. It didn't beg. It just acknowledged. And that was enough. That evening, I didn't write. I just sat by the window watching Claire stand quietly in the snow. I imagined if Julian ever came here and saw that tree, would he understand what her name meant? Maybe not. But that's all right. Before bed, I picked up my phone. A missed call from Julian. I didn't open it. Instead, I lifted the letter he'd sent, read it once more, then folded it and placed it into my old leather journal. The one where I'd kept ultrasound prints, Claire's childhood drawings, letters never sent. I didn't call back.
E chose que é.
Before turning off the light, I opened my journal and wrote the final line for today. I no longer belong to anyone. And that is the best thing I've ever become. Then I closed the book and set it on the table. Outside, the snow kept falling. The porch chair stood still, and on Claire's young branch, a single flake had settled, glinting under the warm light from the window. I watched it for a while, then went inside. I said nothing because for the first time, everything was enough. Some mornings I still make tea the way I used to. But now, not to wait for anyone. I live in this small wooden house surrounded by quiet rows of grapevines. And for the first time, I don't feel like the extra piece in someone else's life. I used to think that sacrifice was a way to hold on to love. But now I understand. If a person doesn't cherish themselves, even those closest to them can forget them as easily as an old coat worn for years, then left behind the door. And if you're hearing this, perhaps it's time to ask yourself, are you living as if you truly deserve each breath you take? If my story made you pause even for a moment, then let that moment be something gentle you offer to yourself. Because sometimes just choosing to stop waiting is already the beginning of truly